And we kick things off with a look at the competing messages from the two candidates for President of the United States.
I see an America where we hold fast to the fearless belief that built our nation.
We are indeed a nation in decline.
It is now our turn to do what generations before us have done, guided by optimism.
It's a massive invasion at our southern border that has spread misery, crime, poverty, disease, and destruction.
I will be a president who unites us.
Crazy Nancy Pelosi.
Who is realistic.
The biggest rally you've ever seen.
Practical.
Build an Iron Dome over our country.
And has common sense.
The late, great Hannibal Lecter. He'd love to have you for dinner.
And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families.
The head of the Taliban, you call me Your Excellency. I wonder if he calls the other guy Your Excellency. I doubt it.
I will always honor and never disparage their service.
Our military is not woke. It's just some of the fools on top that are woke.
I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un.
North Korea, Kim Jong-un, I got along very well with him.
Donald Trump, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans.
We will return law and order to our streets.
Separately found liable for committing sexual abuse.
We will launch a new era of safety.
You can always trust me to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power.
We had that horrible, horrible result that we'll never let happen again. The election result, we're never going to let that happen again. They used COVID to cheat. We're never going to let it happen again.
Oh, Jonathan Lemire, that is quite a contrast.
Quite a contrast.
Claire McCaskill, Eddie Glaude Jr. still with us. And joining the conversation, we have NBC News national affairs analyst and a partner and chief political columnist at Puck, John Heilman, author and NBC News presidential historian Michael Beschloss, and associate professor of political science at Fordham University, Christina Greer. Good to have you all with us this hour.
So, Willie, the contrast is so great, is so extreme. It is optimism versus pessimism. It is joy versus resentment. It is looking toward the future versus looking for retribution. It is a striking choice. I will say it seems like no choice to me. It seems very simple. You don't vote for the guy that actually started a riot and is still praising those rioters and now going to be holding fundraisers to benefit those rioters. But this is a close race. Democrats should listen to Michelle Obama and understand this is a close race and they're going to have to fight to the last second.
Yeah.
Without question. And we did, to the credit of some of the speakers last night, we heard that theme last night, which is the magic that we're all feeling in this room last night, talking about the Democrats who were here. It's great for this week. Now we got to capture it, bottle it, and push forward. Get out on the road tomorrow. Volunteer. Get out the vote. Do all the things that have to be done. It's not about a convention, one of them said. This isn't the end of something. This is the beginning. And I think part of what the party had to accomplish this week was to assure Democrats we've got this. We understand things have felt a little shaky since that debate a couple of months ago. You weren't sure if the president was going to stay in the race. You weren't sure if he got out who would come next, if that person could do the job. The Democratic Party saying we've got this. And John Heilman, the speech last night from Vice President Harris went a long way in terms of assuring voters across the country. And she made that contrast that Joe just referenced, which is laying out her bio, talking about her career as a prosecutor. She said, I was always for the people. I was here to represent the people. She threaded that into all the work she's done since then, and then came around and laid out Donald Trump's life and his political career and said he has always been for himself. And there's the contrast.
The back when Joe Biden went to the debate in Atlanta, Jen O'Malley Dillon came on my podcast, and the campaign was out saying, we've now have our frame for this election. He's all about himself. We're all about you. And one of the things that became evident was that Joe Biden wasn't going to make that case as forcefully as possible, as forcefully as necessary. Last night, Kamala Harris made that case in 7 different ways, and she made it directly in a kind of prosecutorial way when she did that riff. Consider Donald Trump. Consider. She sounded very much like the lawyer that she is. But the contrast of we're about you, he's about himself. It was made implicitly and explicitly. It was made directly and indirectly. It was woven throughout. And to go to one of the most striking contrasts, I think, for the thing that I kept hearing from people who were non-political friends of mine last night, I didn't know how hawkish she was on foreign policy, people would say. The language, the use of words like lethal, security, that were just woven throughout her speech, the invocations of, in a very forceful way, of the embrace of the flag, the embrace of normalcy, of a patriotism in a kind of unabashed way. That, again, we saw it for 4 straight days here, but her speech last night was a kind of, I won't call it a work of art, but it was a very people go back and take that speech apart in a variety of ways and look at all of the different kinds of movements in it that allowed her to keep making those very consistent narrative and contrast points that were throughout these 4 days. She made them in all kinds of ways, just saying really, really effectively.
Yeah, and threading the needle on the question of Gaza, which has hovered over this, saying, quote, "To be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself," making clear we support Israel, we stand shoulder to shoulder, but we have to stop the suffering in Gaza, saying she's going to work toward a ceasefire deal. Claire, one of the other themes we heard all week, and Vice President Harris really drilled in last night, was that we're not going backward. And I think that gets to a sentiment that almost everybody in this country feels, which is we're exhausted by this. We don't want to wake up every morning and see what the president said or did or tweeted or who he insulted or how he embarrassed us. And she's saying effectively, we got to go that way. We can't go back there.
You know, this is what really Trump is struggling with, because overnight, Kamala Harris became the candidate of change. And if you look historically at presidential elections, people who make up their mind at the end have a tendency to go towards the candidate they think is most likely to change things. And she is now the candidate of change. You know how happy the campaign was this morning when headlines across the country were a new way forward? She is no longer somebody who is the vice president. She is a presidential candidate. And, you know, the contrast that you've referred to, John, I thought one of the most effective ways she did it when she said the only client I've ever had is the people, which is very unusual for a lawyer. But she can say that with complete accuracy, and then she turned and said the only client he's ever had is himself. So I think they've pulled off something that for a sitting vice president who you think would be cloaked in incumbency, she's now the new kid in town.